People are not clean-cut binaries. Women are not all twink owo little princesses, and men are not all giant sword-wielding bulldogs. All right, so first bit of fan art we have to look at real quick is one that was done by Angel Dust, the 17th, I believe so. And voxel piece that they made for Nekosuris based on a new game coming up, Billy Bust Up, featuring Nekosuris as Fran Tokyo, and Cult of an Uprising as a stringy running noodle project. I've had enough of cults. Fan work for Nekosuris and the war on the misinformation that Call for an Uprising spreads around. I even gave Suris hammer gems, which have a core attached to them as a plant, with filters and flames and the jet hammer for a cleaner swing. And yes, I used a voxel skeleton, novel work, but I still took a while to make this. And yes, that is a halo above Nekosuris. Honestly, this is probably one of the most interesting pieces that I've ever actually gotten. And thank you for all the explanation, because I would have been very lost otherwise. We also have a piece from Blue Feather, which is a baby Suris. And I don't know how to feel about it, and neither do you. Anyways, as always, thank you all for your fan art submissions. I greatly appreciate it. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future episode, drop it into the Discord section, Discord fan art section, and we will be able to throw it up on stream at a point in time later. With that said, Dawkins. So, A says, please sign the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights. I have done so. Senor, or I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm so terribly sorry. Ada Senor. Thank you very much for redeeming your points for an owl. Before we read into it, I want to point out that Matt Dillahunty pops in. I won't be signing. It's just a way for anti-trans bigots to pretend like they're doing something good when they're doing the opposite. You continue to have transphobic and fear. You continue to cave to transphobic fear-mongering, while the rest of us actually educate and improve the world with humanist values. Sad. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Let's see why we're here. And there's 26,000 individual signatures from 153 countries, 396 organizations. Let's go ahead and read the declaration. So he's Team TERF? We don't know. Let's find out based on what he has signed. Download translated PDFs of the declaration here. Let's go ahead and just take a look at it. The Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights, on the reaffirmation of women's sex-based rights, including women's rights to physical and reproductive integrity, and the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women and girls that result from the replacement of the category sex with that of gender identity, and from surrogate motherhood and related practices. Cracknot, thank you for redeeming your points for the Arahara, you fucking monster. So, the reaffirmation of women's sex-based rights, including the right to physical and reproductive integrity. So this already sounds like it's supposed to be good. The elimination of forms of discrimination against women and girls that result in the replacement of category of sex with that of gender identity. Well, hold on. What discrimination happens whenever you have gender identity as the conversation instead of sex? Well, let's see if maybe they can clarify here. This declaration reaffirms... Oh, I'm sorry, this is a Tristan Taylor time. This declaration reaffirms the sex-based rights of women, which are set out in the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1979. Further developed in the Committee General Recommendations, Article 1 of the Convention defines discrimination against women to mean any distinction, exclusion, or restriction made on the basis of sex, which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women, irrespective of their marital status, on a basis of equality of men and women, of human rights and fundamental freedoms of the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, and any other field. So again, this sounds okay right now. First off, no one's trying to replace sex, so... And nobody's replacing sex. We're just saying that when it comes to terms of identity, categorically the social tool is better than just the biological one. They go on here to say, sex is defined by the United Nations as the physical and biological characteristics that distinguish males from females. This places obligations on state parties to take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to modify or abolish existing laws, regulations, customs, and practices which constitute discrimination against women, and to take in all fields appropriate measures, including legislation, to ensure the full development and advancement of women for the purpose of guaranteeing them the exercise and enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms on the basis of equality with men. All right. Again, so far, everything seems okay. It doesn't seem terrible yet. Continues on. It has long been understood in the area of human rights that the stereotyped sex roles of men and women are a fundamental aspect of women's inequality that must be eliminated. 1. States parties shall take all these appropriate measures to modify the social and cultural patterns of conduct of men and women, with a view to achieve the elimination of prejudices and customary and all other practices which are based on the idea of the inferiority or superiority of either of the sexes, or the stereotyped roles for men and women. Again, we sound okay so far. 2. Gender refers to the roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society at a given time consider appropriate for men and women. These attributes, opportunities, and relationships are socially constructed and are learned through the socialization process. Recent changes replacing references to the category of sex, which is biological, with the language of gender, which refers to stereotyped sex roles in the United Nations documents, strategies, and actions, has led to confusion which ultimately risks undermining the protection of women's rights. So how? If all people who identify as women, cis or otherwise, are protected as a matter of women's rights, then who's losing rights here because we've broadened the scope to gender? Who lost that? The confusion between sex and gender has contributed to the increasing acceptability of the idea of innate gender identities and has led to the promotion of a right to the protection of such identities, ultimately leading to the erosion of the gains made by women over decades. Women's rights, which have been achieved on the basis of sex, are now undermined by the incorporation into the international documents of concepts such as gender identity and sexual orientation. What? So what has not happened yet has been identifying what rights for women are being eroded by recognizing that gender is separate from sex. The argument here is that allowing gender identities causes the need for them to be protected. Here's the thing, if you're a biological woman and you're cis, your gender identity is probably still woman, right? Like you're female and you're cis, you probably identify as woman. Okay, hello Amber Alert. Let's see if maybe they can demonstrate where their rights are being eroded. He goes on to say, sexual orientation rights are necessary in eliminating discrimination against those who are sexually attracted to persons of the same sex. Protections for people who are attracted to the same sex, if we include gender as a conversation? I'm sorry, but protecting the rights of people who are attracted to the same gender will naturally protect people who are attracted to the same sex as well. Rights relating to sexual orientations are compatible with women's sex-based rights and are necessary to enable lesbians whose sexual orientation is towards other women to fully exercise their sex-based rights. Right. Which rights of yours have been stripped away? However, the concept of gender identity makes socially constructed stereotypes which organize and maintain women's inequality into essential innate conditions, thereby undermining women's sex-based rights. Oh? I see that they're probably going to get into that here in a second, but I just want to ask the question. If one person operates based on a set of stereotypes that they find comfortable, how does that undermine your rights? Gender identity is not about conforming to a set of stereotypes. That does not undermine cis people's rights. Cis people have gender identities too. Jesus fucking Christ. But continuing on, gender identity is understood to refer to each person's deeply felt internal and individual experience of gender, which may or may not correspond with the sex assigned at birth, including the personal sense of body, which may involve a freely chosen modification of bodily appearance, function, medical or surgical or other means. Other expressions of gender include dress, speech, and mannerisms. Okay? The rights of individuals to dress and present themselves as they choose is compatible with women's sex-based rights. All right? However, the concept of gender identity has enabled men who claim a female gender to assert in law, policies, and practice that they are members of the category of women, which is a category based on sex. No, it's not. It's a category based on gender. You want it to be based on sex, but that's not the same thing. Watch it come down to they'll screw our women and children. So far, it's literally just said... Okay, let's pretend. Let's pretend. Avadria, thank you very much for the follow. Let's pretend for a moment that there's a room with 50 cis women and 50 cis men. And then one of the cis men comes out of the closet. Their eggshell breaks. They weren't actually a cis man. They were in the closet. They are actually a trans woman. And they go to the other side. Based on rules of equality, all 50 people in both scenarios were allowed to have the same food, the same housing, the same everything, the same benefits. What changed when the dude who was never a dude now pops over to the other side? What's changed? Have any of the 51 women now lost rights? Or have any of the 50 women lost rights now that they actually find out there's 51 women? No, their rights are largely the same. Nothing's fundamentally changed. All that's changed is there are now 51 women and 49 men. Oh, but one of the cis women was in the closet. They actually were not, they were not very comfortable in this group of people, so they weren't going to come out. But they see the one trans woman and go, you know what? No, I am a guy. I've been living a lie. I am a guy. And they go over to the other side. What's changed? We got 50 people on both sides with the same fucking rights, and not a damn thing has actually changed here. Ilya says the argument's worse when you involve trans guys into the equation, which is why I just put them in the equation. There is no difference in their rights or anything else here. Each of those 50 women can perform based on whatever they want, whether it be a stereotype they want to live up to, or whether it be forging their own path. It doesn't matter. They're able to do exactly what they want, and nothing has actually changed. But they have to pretend it did. This was the funny thing about when Neil deGrasse Tyson had his conversation with Ben Shapiro about trans people, and he just went, "Why do you care? If trans people have rights, what changes for you? What happens?" The General Recommendation number 35 notes that General Recommendation number 28 on the core obligations of the state parties under Article 2 of the Convention, as well as General Recommendation number 33 on women's access to justice, confirms that discrimination against women is inextricably linked to other factors that affect their lives. The committee's jurisprudence highlights that these may include being lesbian. Right. Now, let's see where they fuck it up. The concept of gender identity is used to challenge individuals' rights to define their sexual orientation on the basis of sex rather than gender identity, enabling men who claim a female gender identity to seek to be included in the category of lesbian, which is a category based on sex. This undermines the sex-based rights of lesbians and is a form of discrimination against women. How? If one more person in the world categorizes themselves as a lesbian, what rights did you lose? How did you lose them? How did those rights disappear? There's 10 people in a pot, but oh dear God, if we put an 11th person in the pot, everybody's rights disappeared. If one person gets born and they happen to be a lesbian, the same number of people have changed, whether that person's a lesbian because they're a cis woman or because they're a trans woman. Nothing fucking changed here. Rights aren't cookies. There's not a finite amount of rights. There's a finite amount of cookies. Some men who claim the female gender identity seek to be included in the legal category of mother.
The proposition emphasizes maternal rights and the social significance of maternity. Maternal rights and services are based on women's unique capacity to gestate and give birth to children. This includes men who claim females' gender identity within the legal category of mother, erodes the social significance of maternity, and undermines the maternal rights for which this provides. So wait, hold on. Which the fuck do you want? Do you want to be treated equally, or do you want your special fucking participation prizes for the ability to be bred? Which is, because earlier you were very, very, very fucking upset about things not being equal between the sexes, but now suddenly you've got a special thing that makes things not equal between the sexes, and oh dear God, you must keep that one sacred. Oh dear God, imagine what would happen when we have the ability to give a womb to a trans woman. Imagine what happens when that happens. Also, you can be a mother because of adoption. By this logic, does this mean women who have adopted are not mothers? Yes, by this logic, women who adopt are not mothers. Women who lack the ability to gestate, who lack the ability to be bred, are not mothers and can't be mothers based on this. This is the dumbest fucking take, and Richard goddamn fucking dumb shit Dawkins thinks that this is a good fucking thing. Jesus fucking... You know what? No, hold on. Finally had to just call Richard a dumb shit. I'm sorry. I'm just going to publicly harass Richard Dawkins on Twitter. I'm going to retweet that BRB. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action states that the explicit recognition and reaffirmation of the right of all women to control all aspects of their health, in particularly their own fertility, is basic to their empowerment. Cool. Now, trans women existing, how does that change that? This right is undermined by the use of surrogate motherhood, which exploits and commodifies women's reproductive capacity.
How? 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 By what mechanism? It is explicitly fucking over adoptive mothers, yes. I'm sorry, in what fucking way?
The exploitation and commodification of women's reproductive capacity also underpins medical research, which is aimed at enabling men to gestate and give birth to children. Cool, okay, no. Real quick fucking rant. Off tangent, but on tangent rant, okay? Okay, listen. Do you know what this argument is? You know what this is? This is the argument against AIDS research because cancer exists. This is the dumb fucking son of a bitch going into the ward where people are being treated for AIDS in the middle of a crisis and going, why are you worried about this? Cancer exists. We should be putting the money into fighting cancer. It doesn't fucking matter. This is a Wendy's, sir. Get the fuck out of this ward and go fund an anti-cancer campaign. It doesn't fucking matter. We have these two problems. If a trans woman wants to have a womb and all the mechanisms given to them so that they have the ability to give birth, and in a funny twist of irony, the womb and everything are donated by a trans man who no longer wants them because they contribute to their dysphoria, that did not undermine your ability to have a fucking kid. If you want a kid, go be fucking submissive and breedable. You can do it. You can do it. You have the ability to go be the submissive and breedable trad wife you want so that you can claim that biological fucking flag if you desperately need it so fucking much. Remember, equality, everybody. The inclusion of men who claim a female gender identity within the legal categories of women, of lesbian, and of mother threatens to remove all meaning from these categories as it constitutes a denial of the biological realities on which the status of being a woman, being a lesbian, and being a mother are based.
Except there are lesbians who are exclusively attracted to women who would date Blair White, who would date ContraPoints, who would date, well, insert well-known fucking trans woman here, doesn't matter. Their lesbianism was not undermined by a trans woman existing. If more people are able to be mothers, that does not undermine motherhood. Just like getting a hysterectomy and removing people who can potentially be mothers does not undermine fucking motherhood. If there are 50 potential mothers in the room and 5 get a hysterectomy, but we get 5 more because we've implanted freaking ovaries and a womb and all the mechanical things required to bear children, childbirthing hips, all that shit just shoved right into 5 trans women. And then those trans women walk on the other side. Guess what? We have 50 potential mothers. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed.
Organizations that promote the concept of gender identity challenge the right of women and girls to define themselves on the basis of sex and to assemble and organize on the basis of common interests as a sex. This includes challenging the rights of lesbians to define their sexual orientation on the basis of sex rather than gender identity, and to assemble and organize on the basis of their common sexual orientation.
You can do that. Here, look. It's as easy as this. It's as easy as this. There's a lesbian bar, and at the lesbian bar, there are 45 lesbians. They are all cis. One trans woman walks into the bar. Of the 45 lesbians, none of them want to date the trans woman because something genitals. The lesbianism was not challenged. They just showed their preference. Now, let's say that they don't want to date the 46th woman who walks into the bar because they are unattractive. Guess what has changed? Nothing. It's the same goddamn thing. There was an aesthetic or phenotypical preference that the person who walked into the bar did not meet. In one scenario, it was due to a perceived idea of what their genitalia would be. And in the other, it was based on visible factors like, I didn't like how her face looked, or I didn't like how her body was shaped. In both scenarios, the 46th person does not get laid. But in only one scenario, there's a goddamn panic. It's the lesbian version of the guy who doesn't want to date trans. Yes, it's super straight, but they're not using the word because, well, I guess super straight was a phase. I don't get it. How is somebody undermined because somebody who is trans walked into their space? It's as easy as just don't date them. If you don't want to date them, just don't date them. Nobody can make you date somebody you don't want to date. Just don't if you don't want to. You don't have to be a bigot about it. It's as easy as, instead of saying, I'm not going to date you because you're trans, hey, I just don't want to date you. That, boom. You managed to annex the bigotry from the statement. You can not want to date anyone. Your reasons can also be just personal. It doesn't matter. But when we get shit like this, you get people who go, actually, it's okay for me to be a transphobe because I don't want them to date me. No, the fuck it's not. Shut the fuck up. Continuing on.
In many countries, state agencies, the public bodies, and private organizations are attempting to compel persons to identify and refer to individuals on the basis of gender identity rather than sex. These developments constitute forms of discrimination against women. No, the fuck they don't! If all the women who you are worried about being discriminated against also identify as women, all of their rights are still identical. Nothing has changed. Men who claim a female gender identity are being enabled to access opportunities and protections set aside for women. This constitutes a form of discrimination against women.
How? Name the opportunity and protection set aside for women that is lost when an extra person has access to them. Yeah, there's a lot of how missing from this manifesto. There's a lot of statements and not a lot of backup. Yeah, so now even referring to people as their gender is oppression and discrimination. Yep. They want to forcibly call trans men women, ignoring their autonomy, and at the same time they want to abuse trans women. Yep. It's just about abusing trans people. Goes on to quote different articles and shit.
Article 7 affirms that the importance of measures to eliminate discrimination against women in political public life. And Article 4 affirms the importance of temporary special measures to accelerate de facto equality between men and women.
Right. If we have de facto equality between men and women, that includes trans men and women. Trans men and women being part of that conversation doesn't change jack.
When men claim female identities and they are admitted to women's participation quotas and other special measures designed to increase women's participation in political and public life, the purpose of such special measures in achieving equality for women is undermined.
But if a trans woman is or if a trans man, who they would call a woman, would not have access to these opportunities because they are opting to not be perceived, to not be legally registered as what have you, and then a person they would perceive as a man, a trans woman, has access to these things, then one person chose not to have access and one person chose to have access, and nothing has actually changed here. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say this right now. Karen, if a trans person gets the job that you wanted, you might just have been shitty and not hired for that reason. It probably doesn't have a whole lot to do with the fact that a trans person got hired there. Trans people are not being hired en masse through affirmative action. Even if they were, it still wouldn't be a bad thing. But okay. Trans men, including those that pass as cis men, would be put into the quota taking opportunity away from women. And that would be their argument, but it's not a good argument. Oh no, you lost an employment opportunity. A lot of people lose employment opportunities. And you can't guarantee that it's because a trans person got chosen. It was equally likely that another cis person was going to get chosen and you'd get farked. Like, what's actually happening right now is not trans people taking jobs away from women. What's actually happening right now is that there are several places where it is legal to fire people for being trans. Based on places that are like right to work states, like where I live, you can fire someone for being trans because you can fire somebody for any reason. All you have to do is lie. We find out that a person is trans. We want to fire them. All we have to do is make a paper trail and make a case. And now suddenly we don't have to pay their unemployment. And also we got to fire them and they don't get to come back. You can fire someone for being trans. Yes. In right to work states, you can fire people for anything. Literally anything. Let's continue.
Article 10 calls on state parties to ensure that women have the same opportunities as men to participate actively in sports and physical education. Due to physiological differences between women and men, the exercise of this right by women requires that certain sports activities are single-sex. When men claiming female gender identities are unable to participate in women's single-sex sporting activities, women are placed at an unfair competitive disadvantage and may be placed at increased risk of physical injury. All right, so point by point. Increased risk of physical injury. You didn't want increased risk of physical injury? Stop playing fucking sports. Secondly, not all men are built to be giant fucking bulls. At least people that they would call men. A trans woman is not automatically going to be at a physical advantage to a cis woman. Karen, twinks exist. We have very small men. Secondly, let's go ahead and talk about what the Olympics actually uses for this shit. The Olympics says that if you've been on HRT for at least a year, then you are able to compete in the gendered category that fits your identity. You've been on estrogen for a year and you've been on HRT, then you now compete as a woman. Now, why is this the case? Because it turns out that the biological advantages that one has by being born male get eroded when you take the hormones of the opposite sex. But it gets weirder than that. You see, there are people who have higher testosterone or estrogen levels than we would normally expect who are cis. There have even been cases of people being harassed and having to take several tests to prove that they aren't that they are, quote, real women, only to find out that they have to actually take testosterone blockers because they naturally have testosterone we would expect to see from men. People are not clean-cut binaries. Women are not all twink owo little princesses, and men are not all giant sword-wielding bulldogs. It's just trans women in sports again. You remember when it was just a hypothetical conversation? Do you remember when everybody in the fucking dumb shit atheist community, I'm sorry, I'm part of the community as well, but you guys have to understand how stupid this argument was. You guys have to understand how fucking dumb this controversy was. But now it's manifesting in the real world. And there are people who are just like, well, I just wanted to have my opinion. Shut the fuck up.
No. Now it's real people really being affected by these things, really losing their ability. It's no longer fucking hypotheticals.
It has long been understood in the area of human rights that violence against women and girls is universally endemic and is one of the crucial social mechanisms by which women are forced into subordination. The United Nations I'm just going to read the thing. Violence against women is a manifestation of historically unequal power relations between men and women. Would you like to know who also has historically unequal power relations? Trans people. Literally all trans people. Literally all of them. Every fucking one of them. All of them have unequal power relations with cis people. But go on, Queen, I guess. Let's go ahead and say here, just reading forward, the domination and discrimination is based on sex and not gender identity. The conflation of the category of sex is what... Okay, so they're literally saying, hey, we get beat more often. We have to claim that. Maybe we should be trying to solve the problem of women being more likely to be abused than trying to claim the category of women and feeling special for the abuse. Maybe? Also, statistically, violence against trans women is really goddamn high. Especially sexual violence. But, you know, I guess it's just a thing. Nobody gets to be a victim like me. Only I get to be the victim. How much more of this is there? Is this going to have to be a two-parter? This thing is so long. This is so long. Continuing on here. Sex disaggregated data is data that is cross-classified by sex, presenting information separately for men and women, boys and girls. Sex disaggregated data reflects roles, real situations, general conditions of women and men, girls and boys in every aspect of society. When data is not disaggregated by sex, it is more difficult to identify real and potential inequalities. Right. You can still... Okay, so it's easy. You disaggregate your data by sex, and then you also have it disaggregated by gender categories. You do both. Easy. Ziggy Diggy, thank you for redeeming your points for an owl. Like, we can do it by date. We can do it by gender and by sex. Nobody's erasing sex. That's the thing here. This whole manifesto pretends that sex is being erased, but it's not. Sex is important, but so is gender. That's the classic fucking victim strategy. Scream that they are trying to erase your special thing, so you must claim it, and then erase their special thing. In reality, nobody's erasing sex. Nobody's trying to do that. The only person erasing anything in this case is the TERFs. But they have to claim the victimhood first so that it is... It's the best way to say this. If you claim to be the victim first, it feels more like self-defense and not an outright attack when you go attacking a minority group. Does it get better? Oh, cool! Now we're in the preamble. We're in the preamble now. This is going to have to be a two-parter. It has to be. Oh, wait! We got another one here. The concept of gender identity is used to gender reassign children who do not conform to sex stereotypes or who are diagnosed with dysphoria, medical intervention that carries a high risk of long-term adverse consequences on the physical or psychological health of the child, such as the use of puberty-suppressing hormones, cross-sex hormones, and surgery, are used on children who are not developmentally competent to give full, free, and informed consent. Such medical interventions can cause a range of permanent adverse physical health defects, including sterility, as well as negative effects on psychological health. So here's the thing. I'm going to use very flippant language here when I say this. Most people who are trans are more concerned
with eliminating their dysphoria if they have it than with whether or not they are breedable. Moreover, we do not, generally speaking, give cross-sex hormones to children. We give puberty blockers. And the negative effects of the puberty blockers are the same as the negative effects of having late puberty. The calcium deficiencies, the harder chance with fertility, that stuff is the same stuff that happens when you have not had puberty at the same age as you would normally have. Like if you have puberty way into your teens, you have these negative effects as well. Puberty blockers are also reversible by just not taking the fucking puberty blockers. Moreover, you're not concerned with the psychological health of the child, because if you were, then you would agree with the breadth of medical and psychological information that says that when we allow people to be affirmed in their gender identities, then their psychological health is improved. This is not about children's psychological health. This is about your personal comfort and your ability to claim victimhood and to rope more people into the victim category. And then to use that information to claim that somebody else is victimizing you and children when they are not. We also don't do surgeries at the same amount as we do when it comes to fucking adults. We generally don't perform sex reassignment surgery on children. We generally don't perform giving cross-sex hormones to children. These are things that we generally don't do. But by the way, if you were to stop the ability for children to have puberty blockers, then I hope you're ready to accept the deaths that come from breast cancer in kids. Because one of the reasons that we developed puberty blockers in the first place was not for the benefit of trans people. Oh, we do, but only if the kid is intersex. Well, yeah, fair. We don't do this stuff we didn't do that shit for the benefit of trans people to begin with. We did that because we were noticing that there were people who could develop breast cancer very early in life, and we needed a way to stop it. And we found out that a lot of breast cancers actually tend to get starved if we starve the body of the hormones that would develop said breasts. So we use puberty blockers to allow us to have one more tool in the arsenal to kill that cancer, or at least to make sure that there's a higher likelihood the person will be able to live through that. It just so happens that they also happen to work very well for allowing people to not experience a puberty without their consent as a child. Children do not consent to puberty. They don't. Flat out. It is a physiological change in them that is generally very uncomfortable for a lot of people, and they do not consent to it. For the most part, we all just have to go through it. Nothing wrong with that. But if somebody is going to have irreversible side effects to said puberty, in one case, the non-starvation of a cancer growing in their system, we use puberty blockers. If there's another negative effect, like gender dysphoria and an increased likelihood for suicide, we should probably also allow the puberty blockers in that particular scenario. Because it's the same thing as the cancer. It's a problem, and we have a tool to fix it. But then there's people like the people who wrote this manifesto that are less concerned with the well-being of kids and more concerned with their ability to tokenize them as useful victims. Also, would you like to know other things that we do on children who are not developmentally competent enough to give full, free, and informed consent? Here's one thing that was done for me. I had appendicitis surgery. I was not old enough to have free, full, and informed consent when I had my appendicitis surgery because I was in the 6th grade. Nonetheless, if I had not received it, I would have died. My consent was a non-factor. My survival was. Likewise, the survival of kids who turn out to be trans is increasingly higher when we do things that allow them to affirm their gender identity. But go ahead and bitch about consent as if giving puberty blockers to a child who needs them is the same thing as fucking rape. I've gone on this long enough. We are not even halfway through this manifesto. We will get there, but we won't do it in this video. I also don't have the spoons to get through it in this video. But what I will say is this. Dawkins, you've had the ability to do better for a very long time. You are now actively choosing not to. This isn't an issue where you just aren't speaking on a problem and therefore aren't doing anything to help it. You are now doing things to actively hurt it. You are a biologist who is doing everything in your power to undermine what we know about biology. You are now a scientist who is actively operating in such a way that it goes against what the consensus of medical science is. Exposed Popsicle, thank you for the 200 bits. I'm a trans person. I really appreciate you speaking out about this. I know stuff together. It's stuff that makes me angry. That's as far as I can get into it. Sounds like someone needs his license his science license revoked. And Sexual Satan says, where's my Ara? When did you put one through? You haven't put one through. No, there is one. Sorry. Pansexual Satan, you get an Ara. I'm angry. Grr. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments section below. Fucking plug. Insert end of video tagline here.